I think that's easier. Yeah, I'll just do that.
All right. We are in fact
wardrobe malfunction.
we are in fact going live. Keep that in mind. Okay. So do not say embarrassing things from this point forward.
Have you not visited Sarah9.com? Because that's kind of my whole thing. There was the other morning when I was.
Well, unless that's your branding, in that case, just go for it.
I mean, like if I find success barfing at 3 in the morning to an audience of even 5 or 6 people, which I have done recently, that's more success than I've had in other areas of building audience. I think I'm just going to run with it, and I'm not going to just like keep barfing, but more the idea of just here's what's happening. You're welcome to hang out and judge away if you really like, you know, whatever.
And actually, real briefly, while we're getting started, we could speak for 2 seconds about who we are and what our experience is as people begin to join us.
Sure.
So I'm going to start by saying that I'm Cassie Brighter, and I'm the host of EmpoweredTransWoman.com, and I'm the host of the Empowered Trans Woman Summit. And one of the reasons why I put this together is because as I ventured forward in my transition, I was A, terrified, and B, clueless, and feeling all alone. And I discovered that that was really silly because, in fact, there's all these resources and all these people willing to help. And so I became empowered.
Yay!
But it occurred to me that it would be good to gather all these resources in a big basket and then just kind of offer them up to a larger audience. And that's basically what I did here. And I was at a panel with Erin a few months ago, and I really liked her insights just in terms of relationship dynamics in general. And so I approached her with the idea of participating in this panel. Do we have Nikki joining us yet? I saw her briefly, and then she
popped up,
away.
and then it looked like she lost the line there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're making progress, but I don't know. All right, good. So, Sarah9, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Sarah9 Elliott. You can get to know me at Sarah9.com, and I mean that in the deepest possible way. What I do on my page is operate it the way that most people might operate, the most private possible settings on their personal Facebook, which means that when I'm going through whatever the deepest of traumas that I can imagine, like I recently remembered childhood sex abuse, that just all comes out in real time. Everything is happening as it's happening in my life. I try my best to show it just as it's happening to the world. So that does mean times like when I'm dog sick at 3 in the morning, that's happening. And it's not like so much, hey, look, like this is how I throw up. It's just, this is just what's true. So whatever people think about me and what my life really looks like at home at any hour in the most intimate settings that I can possibly show on Facebook, here's what it actually is. And this spares me from having to engage in this game of narrative and counter-narrative, people saying, well, you must be like this, and saying, well, no, I'm like this, and trying to tell them. I don't have to tell anything because true things are just true. I can show them. And that's it. So that's what I do.
And have people offered to you their feedback in terms of how this is beneficial to them? Because I'm thinking that could be cathartic for some.
I've gotten a lot of messages where people thank me for openly talking about any of my experiences, more especially the more difficult ones. And even you saw at the very beginning, like before we got this running live, that Erin was saying about something that she appreciated my honesty about. I don't know. And that's really it. It's just being forthcoming about all of it. And I think what people really are drawn to about it is the expression of vulnerability, because we're so instructed away from that, right? To never show this stuff. And for me, it's like the point of it is to show that there's this sameness here, right? To not be like, well, why is this cis woman on this panel? And but who cares? This is a dating panel for women. Like that's like, you know, there's a lot of intersection about us being trans, a number of us being trans, but really this is about if you're a woman who has like a different condition of her life than maybe what is the mainstream expectation in some way, how do you negotiate that? How do you navigate that? How do you deal with connecting with people, you know, getting that connection that you feel you need when you have this thing that's being so hugely constructed to mean all sorts of stuff out there that it doesn't mean, but you know, people will carry around these ideas because they're small and they're lightweight, they're easy to carry.
Nikki, your turn.
I finally got my technology working. I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of this conversation.
Oh, we're just saying who we are and what are we doing here.
Oh, my name is Nikki, and I was born. I didn't really have a choice, so I'm here. No. Why I'm here in this panel? I well, I don't know. I guess I'm an inclusive, expansive thinker, and although I have my own personal experiences and opinions that seem to have served me well, I'm always interested in learning more about other people's stories, and especially with an expert in the room, you know, just the more the merrier, I think. And if I can contribute something worthwhile to any of the listeners as well as my fellow panelists, then that's great too.
Thank you, Nikki.
So thank you for inviting me.
We have Miliana in the room too, and Miliana is sideways right now. Let's see if we can get that.
I thought we were filming sideways.
Yeah, could you move your phone?
Let me see what I can do. I may have to switch to my laptop because I'm doing it on my phone.
Okay, that'll work. Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's gonna stay up. I'm doing it on my phone, so my phone might start sliding.
Okay, hopefully not. But welcome, and Miliana is one of the panelists on the Empowered Trans Woman Summit. And would you like to tell us 2 or 3 bits about yourself, real quick?
A little bit about me. Where do I start? So I met Cassie at the LA Trans Pride in June. It was my first one. I just moved here from Florida, originally from New York. And I'm really excited about the roundtable. When she brought this to my attention, I was definitely interested. My experiences are going to be similar, but then also different to everyone else's. Coming from like my ethnic background and moving all over the country, dating on the East Coast, the West Coast, and I was engaged up until last summer. So, my experiences are going to be a little bit more varied, but I definitely wanted to come and speak with all of you and give my input, and I'm just excited to be here.
Thank you very much. And that brings us to Erin.
Hi, everybody. So thanks for joining us, and hi to all the panelists again. I'm Erin Tillman, otherwise known as the Dating Advice Girl, and I've been a dating coach, dating empowerment coach for almost 10 years now here in Los Angeles. I've done everything from consent and dating safety workshops on college campuses, to working at a matchmaking agency last year, to one-on-one coaching, to, oh my gosh, what else? I used to run speed dating events way back in the day, which is interesting, and I've gathered a lot of, I do a lot of speaking at different conferences too. I just spoke at Catalyst Con a couple weeks ago. I was on a panel about beauty and status and privilege and how that influences how we date and how we're seen in the world. So I've committed myself to this. I like to, funny enough that I am helping facilitate this conversation. I feel like my calling is to help improve communication and to moderate and facilitate better communication between people. And someone said before, I can't remember who said it, but maybe Sarah Nine said it. I think it's really important to speak our truth and really, I come from a small town in Ohio where a lot of things I didn't know about anything until I moved to Los Angeles 15 years ago. And so I'm still in touch with a lot of people there, conservative parts of this country, who have never met people that they're terrified of and don't know anything about. So Cassie, I think this is an amazing thing you're doing for people who maybe have never met a transgender person, have heard this word, have heard other terms, and literally are forming an uninformed opinion about who someone is and what they are, and all of these things, all the things. So more knowledge and more information is a really great place to start. So I'm just really happy to be here and contribute what I can, and also listen as well.
Thank you so much. And it occurs to me that maybe a good point to get started would be from the experience that you've gathered so far, Erin, you could talk about the general ways that women get themselves aground, the general way in which we can make our lives difficult or lead ourselves to unhappiness in the dating world, what are things not to do? Is that a good point to start?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I wasn't really sure what the format of this would be.
Mm-hmm.
Is a lot of this will be kind of off the top of my head. Again,
Yeah, we're still
I
not
love
sure
that we can
what
all
the format
contribute to
is.
this. Great. Awesome. So to start off, the one thing I'll say is I think it's really important to know who we are as individuals, as self, because the thing, regardless of gender and sexual preferences and sexuality and all of these things, okay, a lot of things that I've noticed in my 10 years of coaching is that people aren't clear with themselves about identity and who they are going into dating. So then you're in the dating pool, and not everyone, some people are very, very clear about who they are and what they want and what kind of partners they want. But not everyone is. And so if women can be as clear as possible with themselves about who they are first, and then go into dating knowing that and speaking that or being that to others, that's a really good step one. Of course, there's a lot of other things in there too, but that I'll start with that. I think that's a really good place. Identity is a huge beginner to the process.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful starting point. And I think that sometimes we're very, very clear in the fact that we are putting on a facade for the sake of fitting in or for the sake of pleasing others. And sometimes we're not even aware that we're doing it. We're just thinking that I don't know, what comes to mind is the movie Runaway Bride, where nobody knew how she wanted her eggs, and she didn't know how she wanted her eggs. Sometimes you just, you haven't even worked on being genuine to the extent that you haven't met yourself. What do you guys think, sir?
This is so much of what I'm discovered for myself, and it's so funny. This is like I'm like laughing the whole time this interaction with Aaron, because I keep thinking it's gonna go this way and then it doesn't. It's gonna go this way and then it doesn't. But like, you know, your point about like really what you want to do is facilitate communication between people. Like at its core is what you're trying to do. I'm like, that's brilliant, because that's what I'm trying to do too. That's what I would like to see.
Well,
as
thank you, Sarah, and I appreciate that, because I wasn't sure about the laughing either, and I'm like, I just hope everyone's open to listening and sharing.
No,
so
it
I
wasn't.
Appreciate that.
I'm definitely autistic. I should be upfront about that. So I like read things. I find things that are not there for a lot of people, and then I laugh, and then people don't like me anymore. But so dating advice. But anyway, it's so much of what I discovered for myself that led me to where I am now around dating, which is basically to not do it. Was especially with my track of having basically dissociated in a way and having repressed memory of childhood sex abuse, keeping me from being able to understand what I had already known when I was 2, that I was a girl. Getting that back had me looking back and understanding that I had been doing, like on this really like basic fundamental level, a form of this, sort of constructing an identity and holding it up and just carrying it around constantly. And that's enormously tiring work. And the danger for me was that I woke up to myself at all, and that was enough for me to think that I had woken up to myself completely. And that left me very vulnerable to being with someone like my first girlfriend that I was with after I'd come out, in a relationship that ended up being really abusive, because she was constantly telling me what I could be and should be and giving me this, you know, sort of ideas about my potential. And what I didn't understand at the time as I was going through that is that the unspoken message there is that I'm not good enough now, and that I need to be someone else in order for her to truly love me. So going through this long period of time with that and understanding that part of why I'm with her in the first place is that I feel this sort of void that's been constructed culturally of I should have this relationship, the idea that I'm supposed to be with someone. Leaves me in this, you know, vulnerable to these kinds of engagements where someone can say, "Do you want to be my girlfriend?" and have me be like, "Yes," and latch onto that. And now because I'm attached to this context, it lets me excuse a lot of things for them. So my dating practice ultimately evolved away from all of that entirely and towards constantly asking myself, like, what's really happening right now? And not even having a dating practice so much as noticing that my basic practice, my very, very basic constant practice of be where I am, know what is, discard what is not, and do what is kindest, is actually the ideal practice for me around dating, because it's not a practice of looking for a relationship, but being, so that when I am in a relationship, I have skill at being in that relationship rather than skill at noticing that I'm dissatisfied and then going shopping for someone better.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I mean, thank you for sharing all of that. I think it's great. I think that there needs to be more self-awareness going in, and not just this endless search to find, you know, the person that completes you, or, you know, this person that's gonna, you know, yes, of course we want to meet people. Like, we're here on this earth to connect with each other. So of course that's part of it. But I also think that, you know, if we're on this search for the one, or this idea of perfection, we're never going to find it. So self-awareness, and then, you know, connect. The other thing that just came to mind really quickly, I want to throw in there too, is that that Sarah Nine kind of triggered for me in a good way. Is that a good triggering? Is that so often we have this idea that if something doesn't last forever, or for, you know, a long time, that it wasn't meaningful. And that's not the case. You know, some relationships are meant to be short. They teach us something. You know, we connect with someone for a while, and it lasts as long as it lasts. And then that's just what that was. It doesn't mean failure, or, you know, even success, really. It's just certain relationships and partnerships have different time frames.
Right.
So just thanks for sharing all that. It was great.
Thank you.
There's one thing that Sarah shared that I relate to on a very practical basis. Sarah talked about it on a broader kind of philosophical, but on a very practical point, a lot of people do the practice of dating in terms of like actually getting together and going to a venue and sitting in front of each other and staring at each other, and something that I found really successful, which in a way it's kind of distilled practical from what Sarah was sharing, which is just go about your day and allow the other person to witness it with you. So have them meet you and do laundry with them, or join them as they go to the to whatever their chore is, and you just kind of share each other's day without this kind of, because if you spend the money and the time to go to a venue and do an official date, anxiety raises and expectations raise and stuff like that. Whereas if you just kind of allow each other to have a little bit of a window to, this is my routine, this is what I'm doing, I'm driving over there, I'm doing some groceries, there's such a more relaxed kind of interaction, I think. So.
Well, and the evolution of dating, it's all evolving. Everything's evolving currently. Like, we're in a really interesting time at the moment. So when I started coaching and being in the industry of dating around 10 years ago, that was before Tinder and basically dating apps. No dating apps were a thing. Match.com was around. There were maybe a couple dating websites. I'm not even sure OkCupid was around, but maybe. Long story short, the idea of dating and the word dating is triggering for people, you know, and that's one reason why I stopped doing like singles events. Because a lot of times if you say single gathering or gathering for singles or dating, it's so loaded. It's such a load. Those words are so loaded for people, especially younger people, millennials and younger. They totally reject all of that. And so I find that super fascinating. So Cassie, to your point, I think if it can be just seen as something more casual, as just what I like to call it, you know, all dating should be is just a casual get to know you session between two people. That's all it should be. But we make it into this big, crazy thing. I'm doing it wrong. I'm failing. There's no good people out there. All these things we like add into it to make it this scary, terrifying thing.
Functionally, we achieve that by discarding expectation, right? Of going into it just saying, what I will do is meet this person should they arrive. And that's it. And letting the rest just be, and acknowledging that it's going to be that either way. Understanding that only what can happen does happen, that's what's going to happen either way. So I can sit here and build up ideas of it and tell myself stories all night and get upset when the one that I liked best doesn't play out. Or I can just pay attention to what's happening and respond to that. I can feel gratitude when there's something to feel grateful for, instead of being like, well, this is kind of cool, but it wasn't what I was thinking of in my ideal story. So like, B+. You know?
Yeah, I have a question, and I'm thinking that maybe Emiliana might be a good person to speak to this, which is, so in order to have no expectations, one good frame of mind is to think in terms of like, well, there's all these options and there's plenty of fish in the sea. and you get this idea of bountifulness and like, oh my gosh, there's all these beautiful men, there's all these beautiful women that we could date. But as trans women, we have a sense of maybe a limited pool, and B, the concern that some of the people that might be readily available to us might be fetishizing us, might be trying to use us, might be trying to take advantage of us. So how do you negotiate that? How do you still maintain that sense of like, oh, there's plenty of fish in the sea, when you have those concerns to bounce against?
Yeah, that's a good topic. And I think we touched a little bit on that on our one-on-one interview. For me, I definitely feel like there's plenty of fish in the sea. There's so many people in this world, in this state alone. And I feel like the world's basically our oyster. But there are some limitations, I do feel, because I can meet 1,000,001 different men, but the way that they accept my truth is going to be different. So some guys are going to be okay with it. Some guys won't be okay with it. And then the ones that are okay with it, they have different reasons. So some of them are okay with it because they don't care. Some of them are okay with it because they're curious and they want to, understand things, or they want to try it out and see if they like it. And then there are some guys who are okay with it because, they do fetishize, or they do see something in me that they want to exploit. So you kind of have to cipher through everything. And, I've been dating since 2008. So almost 10 years. I was a little later in life, dating, kissing, all the whole shebang. But I've learned so much over the years. And, like I said, I was engaged. So I got to see the good, the bad, the ugly. Like, I know what it's like when someone's really into you. I know when someone is just, wasting your time, or if they just want to experiment, if they just want to use you or exploit you. But I think in general, the world is our oyster. There are a lot of people in this world, and, I get approached very often. It's just, I end up filtering through them once I, start talking to them, and they get past the physical and they get to understand who I am. And, I have to then decide, once I get a response as to how they feel about me being trans, where we're going to proceed. And then even past, finding out what his reaction is going to be, it's ultimately up to me to see if we're compatible, if we have, common interests, if I generally like this person besides being physically attracted to them. Can we have conversation? Can you
do laundry together?
Like, are you someone that I really enjoy spending time with? There's more than us just being physically attracted. So, can I bring you around my friends and my family? So there's a lot of factors that go into dating, and even beyond them finding out, I'm trans.
Yeah, it's really awesome. Oh, go ahead, Cassie. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to do a quick recap. We touched on a couple of things that I think are pretty good, which is Erin started talking about having a good sense of identity, and Sarah talked about being where you are and seeing what's there and discarding what is not, and being kind. And that led us to what Miliana was just talking about, which is to truly see the person in front of you and get a good measure to see if this person is actually, if they have the mettle to continue forward, or or if it's just not quite there. Sorry, I like recapping, but let's keep going.
No, that's incredibly helpful for me. I'm a lot of the experience for me of reality through autism is I tell people that if you look at an LP, a vinyl LP, and you think, well, this is a big background disc, I'm the needle. I can't see that. I can't even understand it. But I hear music that you can't hear because you're looking. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
so for you to come back and recap is like, thank God, because I don't actually know what we're talking about anymore. But if you do that for me, I can be like, oh yes, that reminds me of what we were talking about earlier. People are like, she's really sharp.
Thank you.
But it does. I mean, like, Miliana's point builds off of to what we were talking about earlier, which is, she's saying it's important that you see this person very clearly. And the reason I wasn't able to in my earlier relationship is from what Erin and I are talking about. Is I thought I understood myself was my big weakness, and what was true was that I didn't completely, right? So because I didn't understand myself well enough, I could not see myself completely. I couldn't orient myself well with this other person and truly be able to give her like yes or no about anything. So I mostly said yes to everything, but that was really, it was increasingly untrue, and I was like, reducing myself more and more and more. It was a form of my before life where I was playing this role, some kind of role that was just not me, to be somebody's, prop for like this, appearance of activism. Mm-hmm. So it's foreign to me as going out in the world and be like, my name is Jason. Call me sir. Please don't. Like, all this, so exhausting, right? It makes perfect sense. I look back on it now. It is. It's a form of the same thing. And so, to get to where Miliana's at, I was laughing during this because the thing I was reacting to was, I've been married twice. I've had lots of relationships, but I don't think of myself as having dated till about 2015 when I meet my last girlfriend. And then this new relationship I have with a boyfriend, Jared. And that's kind of it. So I'm old and I've had all these other relationships, but I was so not there for them. I was so dissociated, just playing out this role of propping up this identity that I couldn't sustain. It was exhausting, that I didn't have a way to understand any of this stuff. I didn't have a way to experience it and then learn from it. So I think it was Erin's point earlier, the length of these relationships being what they are, like the hell for me as someone who's hyper literal with the autism, is when someone I feel attracted to says something to me like, you and me forever. That's it. That's done. That's completely true for me. So when she's like, yeah, I tried it out, it just didn't like how it felt and throws away, I'm like, that's devastating to me, right? I don't have a way to experience that, because even with these marriages that came apart, that were sort of forms of that, I was so disconnected from them that the loss of them was kind of like, I skinned my knee. It was a little bit painful, but enough drugs or distraction or whatever kind of things that take me out of it, and I'm back to complete dissociation, which is my 2-year-old self throwing up this shield and trying to survive. So I don't start dating until 2015 and getting anywhere close to where Miliana's at, where she understands herself well enough to look across the table at whoever and be able to say, I can see you, right? There's nothing in the way for her, as there was for me for so long.
You're like a virgin.
Something I'd like to add to this. Is that, at least in my experience, the knowing yourself, and first and foremost, Erin, I very much agreed with what you said about self-knowledge and getting to know yourself being priority number one. Because, what have you to offer anyone else if you don't even know, yourself? But I think something to, just given the recent responses, I want to add to that theme is that, for me at least, it's an ongoing process. There's never a single moment where I'm like, oh, I know myself and everything is cool. Yes. It's 100%. There are just, waves, and I think we go through life phases, and the people we know and the relationships we have, the situations going on in our lives at the time, can make things contextual or relative. I think maybe it's the attitude of being honest with oneself that perhaps helps us to facilitate self-knowledge in a way that's also kind of pragmatically useful in terms of dating and getting to know other people. Because I agree, something that comes, I'm a tarot card reader, I'm not a relationship expert, but this comes up a lot in the cards for a lot of clients. It's that I think too many people try to, they yearn after a certain imaginary situation rather than actually getting to know fellow individuals when they're dating, whether they be conventionally monogamous, monogamish, poly, kink, whatever, just finding partners, right? And I think that so long as you can be honest with knowing what you want and why, right? I am a XYZ because that's what I want right now, or that's what will fit in my life, or that's what I feel that I can contribute and be my best self, right? Maybe you just want to play partner. Maybe you don't want to get married. Maybe you're open to getting married, but you're not locking it down in the next 5 years. You know what I mean? And I think it's kind of that knowing what you want and being able to communicate with authority and confidence about who you are, what you like, what you want, and remaining open to the fact that that may change. You know, nothing's set in stone.
Right.
But for me, at least, that's helped me cut through a lot of the BS right away. And and I think it's like intimacy building. If I think people respond to you know, honest kind of, and it doesn't need to be like full on, like, I mean, in our community, the word disclosure has very many meanings, right? But in my experience, and maybe this is just because I'm blessed or cursed with incomprehensible overconfidence, but I'm just like, look, you're gonna figure out all my skeletons anyway. So like, here's the key to the closet, honey, because like, I ain't got time to mess around. I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. This is LA. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
This piece about fixed identity is so important. This is so much of what I was understanding is that when I woke up to myself, part of that realization was that I had been playing this role that I had constructed. But what I didn't quite understand was that when I let that go, I picked up another one, which was girl. And that was another constructed role. It was ideas of what I was supposed to be. And I ultimately realized that just the idea of holding up the role at all was exhausting and completely counterproductive. It's telling someone what I think I'm supposed to be. And that takes my energy and attention away from what I actually am. So what Nikki's talking about, like what I'm smiling about so broadly, is that this is an expression to me of what I'm talking about in the first place, is why I don't bother with dating. I practice instead towards being where I am and knowing what is. This card was not right. That's knowing what I am in each moment constantly. That's the constant practice of it. Not buying into this idea that like she says, I understand myself now and I am this like forever. Like, no, if I'm this forever, it's because I'm dead. like I'm alive. I need to be present to that or I miss it. And that's it. And like, if I miss it, okay, like I can decide to miss it, but yeah.
I think this is amazing. Nikki, I just want to go back and just thank you for everything you shared with us there. To both of your points, I think you bring up really good points. Identity. Let me circle back. So when I think it's important to be aware of identity before you start dating. That was number one. That was like step one that Cassie asked me. What's tip number one? So because it is evolving, and I agree with both of you, I think it changes depending on who you are, where you are in your life, what you're looking for in terms of a partner, if you're even looking for a partner. And like Nikki said, or maybe it was, I forget our other panelist.
Miliana.
What Miliana might have said, that, you might be interested in sex right now. You might be interested in, a long-term relationship. You might be interested. It doesn't matter. It's important to know what you're looking for now, what your identity is now, presently, so that you can be clear about that with potential partners, or just when you're out and about and you meet someone who's interesting. Maybe you're not even looking. I mean, I even hate the term looking for somebody. Like, know that what you could be open to, right? But it's just important to know. There's so many people who, just in this year alone, and this calendar year alone, the level of aware about self is amazing to me. And I don't want to get, obviously, this is about dating. I'm not going to get into politics or anything, but the thing that I've noticed in terms of people who are having a lot of challenges in terms of interpersonal interactions is that step one is that they're with self-awareness. And so again, just knowing where you are and what you are open to at this moment. That could be different later in December. Maybe I want a long-term relationship, because I can relate to a lot of what's being said personally. I'm currently single, always dating and in different kinds of relationships. But, earlier this year, I was like, gosh, I really think I want a partner. And I was like, you know what? I don't know. I don't think I want to be partnered right now, so it does evolve. But again, I was very clear with myself and with potential partners about that. So
Erin, there's something really funny. There's something really funny that I'm mindful of as I hear you speak about this. And it's the fact, and we're talking about self-awareness, right? And identity. Let me tell you what my criteria was for dating 15 years ago. when I was 4, because obviously I'm 29.
Yes.
But so my criteria was this. This is the kind of person that I was looking for. Anyone who will want me. Anybody who will take me. That was my criteria. And these were my rules for relationship. I swear to God, this was, I didn't have it as clearly in my head as I see it now, but so these were my rules for the relationship. Whatever the hell rules they want, I will abide by those as long as they want me. That's the way, that's the preparedness with which I went into the world. That's the preparedness with which I went through 2 marriages. which was not a terribly empowered position to be from. And then something else that I wanted to share that I'm hoping is going to be kind of a platform or a spring point for you to comment on this, Aaron, is I heard a dating coach, a male dating coach, talking on a radio at one point. He said something, this is a few years ago. He said, I have nothing against relationships. I like relationships. I also like my single times, but I do like relationships. And he was just commenting as he was on the way to an actual point. This was just an aside. But it blew my mind right open, because my understanding of the world is you can be employed or you can be a bum. And you can be in a relationship or you can be a bum. If you're not in a relationship, it means that you're worthless. So, oh my God, go get yourself a relationship. The same way that if you don't have a job, you have to get yourself a job. The idea that I could choose to be powerfully single and comfortably single was like,
yes.
Well, we can speak about, if at some point we get to talking about playing these things out in the context of an actual ongoing relationship. I met Jared in the course of not dating. And he's continuously not my boyfriend, and I'm continuously not his girlfriend. This is all by design, because this is an expression of the same things of being where I am and knowing what is and discarding what is not, so that I can really truly do what is kindest. It's constantly choosing to be together because we have to, because there's no net. There's no, we have a relationship, there's none of that. So I can talk about that at some point if we want to get into it. But I saw we had a question on the YouTube chat, and you wanted to bring to the panel, so I didn't want to make it the Sarah9.com thing, which is really
we're live. How do I see the comments?
You go to the YouTube. I'm going to send you a link. So this is Hazel Jade, and she's asking, as queer women of color, what has been the hardest obstacle when dating other queer people? Aaron, do you want to take that?
I mean, I listen. Yeah, I think I'll just say this. I think some of our panelists could answer this better, but for me, I will say that being as honest as possible about what you're looking for, because queer is different for everybody too. That's the thing. It's not just one category of this, and everyone who's in that category feels exactly the same way. So, really just being honest with yourself about what kind of people you want to date, and then speaking that to them, or just having casual. And like, the thing is too, I feel like when we're speaking our truth, there's this assumption that it has to be like aggressive or like, but me, no, it could just be like, well, here are the things that I'm into and interested in, and you're into that, great. You're not, I don't know, I don't think this is gonna work. And I practice that all the time, even with friendships at this point. And I've gotten really, really selective with all the people in my life, because I feel like right now in the times that we live in, you just have to be for safety reasons, for self-care reasons, for prosperity, whatever, right? You got to be discriminating about who you surround yourself with. So, I'm polite about it. If someone reaches out to me, and I tend to be more of an alpha female, and so if I meet partners who are more alpha, and they're like, hey, like, I'd love you to submit to me or something, I'm like, thank you, but that's not gonna work probably, but thank you, and I just move on with my day or whatever. So that's all I have to say. I'd love to hear from the panel.
And specifically what was interesting about the question was the fact that it was challenges with other queer people, because I immediately thought that the question was in interacting with the larger kind of heteronormic kind of mainstream, but so in dealing with other queer people specifically. Sorry, I just thought that was an interesting part of the question that didn't catch it first. Go ahead, Nikki. Go ahead, Nikki.
Oh, if I could just insert here before I answer that question directly, a few things have come up in the last comments that I would like to attempt to knit together, just because I think they're interesting and relevant. Something Sarah brought up originally about the kind of construct of womanhood and ascribing or not ascribing to that and the challenges that it brings up. And then Cassie bringing up the construct of being in a relationship, black and white thinking of relationship or worthless, that one's self-worth has to be dependent on being with somebody, that your love is essentially something that you accept from someone else, not something that you can produce within yourself. And for me, this is kind of brought up, and why I bring it up, because I believe it's germane to what I would like to contribute to this next question, is for me, it's like framing things in a belief system, like or a belief structure, that if I believe in that, for me personally, the binary cis-het normative construct of relationships and dating or whatever feels beautiful and right to me, that's one belief, right? And I can change that. If I decide it doesn't work, then fine. But I think what's a challenge for those of us who fall out of that, whether it be people of color, queer people, poly people, anyone kind of in, the non-default American-looking white picket fence standard, and no judgment against that. I think that's the thing. I think sometimes those of us who find ourselves in the other category can feel understandably a little self-righteous or defensive. And I think it's important to honor, my parents are, conservative, cis-het, normative white people who are middle class, who went to college and got jobs and, took turns night and day shifts raising their kids. And I love them. They're great people. They also raised a really non-conventional queer person of color, right? And that they fully accept and love. So, I mean, no judgment here. But I would say that when it comes to me personally and dating, and this is true of many of my past lovers and definitely my current partner, is that if I can connect in a macro sense, and Sarah, you mentioned that you can be hyper literal. I can also be, but I single you out here just because I think this is relevant. This is somewhere that we connect. That at least for me, trying to stay macro, keeping the frame large and expansive, helps me kind of weed out the riffraff. Because as an Asian queer person, especially, with the lady boys of Thailand, there's this whole Western trope of, trans feminine Asianness that is very a thing, especially here in LA. And, sometimes I've used that to my advantage, not gonna lie. But other times it can feel, really oppressive and shitty, if I can say that on live share. So where I'm going with this is by keeping my expansive, or my frame more expansive, I focus more on certain core characteristics of a human, or core kind of belief systems that I'm attracted to. Like, for instance, I like someone who values perspective, someone who isn't quick to snap judgment because of their own background or preferences. Someone who's conscientious, because I'm very literal and detail-oriented. If someone doesn't have an appreciation, they don't have to be the same, but if they don't have an appreciation to recognize that, we're just not going to see eye to eye. I believe the same kind of formulation I look for in looking for a good flatmate is ultimately what I look for in a partner. It's like, if my name's on something in the refrigerator, that's mine. Like, there's no question about it. Like, we talked about it, right?
There are a couple of extra requirements for me in a partner than a flatmate.
So to answer Miss Hazel Jade's question, for me, it's I kind of had to personally, I wish someone had told me this, but I'm so headstrong, maybe I wouldn't have listened, but to reverse engineer it, right? So instead of getting wrapped up in all the problems that, or challenges, I don't want to call them problems, because I do believe that the language we use to describe our experiences it's like self-fulfilling prophecies, right? So if
Yes.
we view the world as so difficult and other, and we're always the minority, then that's our reality. And although sometimes that is statistically true, I don't need to believe that in my heart, you know what I mean? Even if it's statistically true. Cognitive dissonance. So where I'm going with this, and thank you for your patience, is that by focusing more on the larger macro fundamentals, I managed to sort of weed out the riffraff. But certain traits that I've discovered, and my partner being one of these people, is that when talking openly about sex and relationships and one's past, I notice a lot of appreciation and openness to multiculturalism and expansive liberal learning, and just sort of more than one point of view, right? If someone says, oh, you know, I come from a conservative background, I've only had these things and I'm like looking to explore, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it tells me that they're self-aware enough and feel safe enough with me to say that. But it's different than someone who says, I lived in New York, I dated a Haitian, I dated a Puerto Rican, I dated a black girl who was awesome, I dated an Asian girl, you know, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It's like someone who, and it's not so much like a check the minority checklist, but in like just and it's almost like, you know, like we have people of color I grew up in the 80s where the colorblind theory was designed to be the inclusive way to overcome racism that now in the 21st century we now see has actually produced some unwitting challenges, right? And it's created a different kind of narrative that is no longer a healthy one. But I think that but again, it's about appreciation, I think, more than, you know, like singling out. So in my experience, at least, it's sort of that, I know, expansive frame of mind that helps the most.
And just
thanks for letting me take some time.
Yes. I mean, you know, but yeah, also just ask questions, you know, like, how do you feel? Like, I describe myself as monogamish, more queer, kind of poly, and that does, you know, kind of ebb and flow depending on where I am in my life. So if someone's like, well, what does poly mean to you? And that means, well, you know, I do kind of operate more in like a primary, secondary kind of way. Like, that's new information for somebody. Like, in terms of like, there's a general category of what you are, potential dating person you might want to date or be a partner with. So you have a framework to work within. And if that sounds terrible to that person, then it's like, oh, okay, this wouldn't be a good person maybe to date. So just ask questions and start talking to potential partners, you know?
Yeah, I can't believe when there's situations where somebody finds out months into the relationship or even years in the relationship that the other person has different views politically or religiously or something like that. It's like, you gotta find out up front, like, very soon. I mean, I will 0% date a Trump supporter, 0%. I will, you know, probably leave the room. This is information that you need.
Yeah, and
that brings up, I have a question.
Cassie, just really quickly. Cassie, you're right. I can't tell you how many couples I know have broken up in the last several months because they found out that their partner was racist or that their partner, you know, whatever it is. It's like so many couples don't talk to each other or, you know, just started dating because they were attracted to the person and didn't really like ask important questions. Again, that's why it's so important to know self first, identity, as it is now for you. And ask people about those things, like what matters to you? What is going to be a massive deal breaker for you? You know, what's going to change the way you see that person if they, you know, have a certain view about something? Those questions, they're scary to ask, but you got to ask them up front.
Yeah, quite often we just don't want to ask the questions because we don't want to hear a disqualifying answer. We don't want to find out that this real cutie pie that we want to bang tonight happens to be a racist.
I feel like this is both the great vulnerability and also like the deep power and strength of trans people and of this experience is this identity piece, is that ultimately I feel that because of how deeply we're constructed to be what we are not, we can't help but confront this constantly. And this is something we either don't survive or come to a place of understanding really deeply how constructed all of that is, and just being able to see better, like really what is true, and really see ourselves and see other people. And that is both tremendously attractive and also deeply terrifying for other people to experience. So that's
actually probably a really, really good description of trans women, the perception of trans women to a lot of cis men, which is we're very attractive and we're deeply terrifying.
Right, and the thing is, they don't quite understand. I wasn't going to go on because I didn't want to. I feel like I'm doing all this babbling, and I wanted to have Mariana have some space, but it looks like she's vanished for a moment.
Oh, but Nikki wanted to add something too.
Yeah.
I wanted to sort of take that opportunity to ask you, Erin. I think we've naturally sort of ventured into the area of vulnerability and intimacy building. And for me personally, it's kind of, because I'm, I don't know, overconfident and shameless. It's like I'll ask point blank things, and that's kind of like my personal like character meter. I'm just like, if you're shocked or scared, then we're not going to work out, because I need someone that's confident in me. You know what I mean? Like that's like a dimension that's important to me. But I was going to ask you, it's like for maybe people for whom that they didn't stumble into that naturally, is there any kind of like practical advice you can give to maybe shyer people or people who are more timid about being open and vulnerable and honest, even if they know themselves?
And hang on, because we're actually multitasking. We have about 3 or 4 things that we're trying to do at the same time. And I'm overloading Erin with tasks. But so one task for Erin is you probably have a main thread that you want to bring, and please keep that in your head. The second one is to satisfy the dialogue, which is very rich and very interesting. And then the third one is I want to address some of the questions that are popping up on the chat. And Sarah,
I wasn't sure if I was supposed to talk about the queer dating thing, or I don't have to. If people want to hear what I have to say about literally anything, they can go to sarah9.com. They can ask me. They can talk to me one-on-one. That's all I do. It's literally my only job.
Oh, no, actually, Sarah9.
But go ahead.
In this particular case, I actually, and you don't know this, but I'm looking at the chat, and there's actually there's a young gal called Sarah Saran. And,
I see her now.
Yeah, so I wasn't talking about Sarah9, I was talking about Sarah. And what she's asking is that she's finding that there's a lot of objections to her dating, and she's only 17. And so she's finding basically a pushback, and the sense is that trans people are not entitled or don't deserve to date cis people. And and especially for somebody at 17, I wanted to, well, first of all, I really wanted to reassure you that you deserve to date whoever the hell you want.
Well, Nikki talked about belief earlier, and really in ways that I think touched on what I practice constantly, which is mostly to discard belief as recognizing it as not true, as a construction, an idea of how things should be, or how I think things ought to be or could be, rather than just constantly acknowledging what is. And a lot of what's difficult, I think, for trans people who like wake up increasingly to the unreality of, modern American culture, at least, is that it's a very lonely place to be. And it's difficult to be there seeing how things really are while these people continuously try to come and rope you into some kind of like constructed game or role or something like that, rather than just really being deeply present and feeling whatever we feel and doing whatever there is to do there. Like, what can we actually do right here and right now? That kind of thing. So much of that, like a lot of what gets in the way for me in general, whether it's with dating or with, making myself something to eat or brushing my teeth, taking care of myself in some way, is on some level some kind of belief, this idea for me with the childhood sex abuse, this like very, very deep-seated belief that I should not really try to do anything, because even if I succeed, it won't matter, because I will be doing it to build towards this idea, this belief that is all completely false. So much of my work, and the reason I find that it feels like I'm kind of like pitching this as a cure-all for everything, this 4-step thing that I do, but it's not so much that. It's not that I start with that. It's that I'm doing that consistently on a base level, and that when I try looking at other ways of going through any of these processes or any activity I want to engage in, including something like dating, the reason I end up deleting all my dating apps and just throwing all of that away is because I come to understand that everything is practice, and that if I'm engaged in the practice of this game of looking at Tinder and judging people, of sorting them left and right, that's what my practice is, that's what I'm good at. So even if I go on a date on some level, what I'm really good at and practiced constantly at is rating this person and comparing them to everybody else and deciding whether to swipe them left.
Yeah, based on really, really shallow kind of parameters.
Right. Yeah,
But
rather than, go ahead.
But let me get back to a couple of thoughts I have about Sarah Saran's question here about basically whether or not trans people deserve to date a cis person. And the immediate thought that comes to mind is the movie Loving, which is about an interracial couple in the 50s. And at a time when a black person was not deserving of dating a white person. And one way to frame that would be that
in society wasn't.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah.
one way,
let's say
one
society
way
didn't allow it or whatever.
They didn't allow it. But I'm wording it that way. I'm specifically wording it that way because if you say these two races were not allowed to date, you're kind of indicating an equal footing and an equal lack of privilege. But the reality was that the narrative of the time is that one segment was lesser than and should mind their place. And I find that it's really good, and this is, I'm speaking directly to 17-year-old Sarah who's watching us on YouTube. It's really good to watch the civil rights movement and to watch the gay rights movement and to watch the feminist movement and to just take a page from them, which is there was a time when somebody would tell them that they're not deserving, somebody would tell them that they're not worthy, that they can't stand up, that they can't be here, that they can't use that damn fountain. And so first of all, you have to say, you know what, I'm sorry, yes, I am. I will use this bathroom, I will use this fountain, I will date this person. And secondly, realize that that might lead to pushback, and it might be violent pushback, and that's the world that we live in. So be careful and protect yourself. But anyway, I wanted to allow the other panelists and Aaron, of course, to speak to this point as well.
That's what I was saying about discarding belief, right? You say the narrative, right, at the time, that's what it is. And what is a narrative? It's a story, it's an idea. So if your practice is to constantly discard belief and to know what is real, to really like observe what is true, that you can verify as true, then belief becomes increasingly less and less potent of a weapon. So when someone comes to me and says, you're a dude, I'm like, I can check. Is that true? What's really happening right now? It's not. So what's true is this person has said this. I don't even know if they believe it. Maybe they're just messing with me, right? I don't even know if that's true. I don't even have to consider it because I can acknowledge that I don't know, and then let it go. It's not real.
On that point though, Sarah,
go ahead. Go, Nikki, yeah.
I just wanted to, I feel like I agree with your underlying point, Sarah, but I would suggest a copy edit for Sarah's benefit. That when we talk about like these big idea words like belief and reality, I think that's problematic cognitively because they're so relative to one's personal history and experiences. And I guess if I'm going to talk about it at all, because I did mention belief structure for myself, is Wonder Woman, y'all, the Wonder Woman 2017. It's not about deserve. It's not about deserve. It's about what you believe. And so, Sarah Saran, what I have to contribute to your question is, I think that women throughout history and queer people especially there's been this mainstream attempt to gaslight or brainwash us into thinking that we're undeserving or that we're less than, right?
Yes.
And those are lies. Those are attempts from people in power to keep their power, to keep things unchanged, and to keep us down. We are equal, but there are these narratives that undermine, that like go under all of these little stories, from fairy tales that we tell our children to modern day lyrics and songs. There's just these assumptions about gender and sexuality and queerness that we're to believe. But guess what? It's our choice to buy in or not. If you have been being told by other people that you don't deserve to be in a relationship, with a cis or gender non-conforming or trans person, regardless of gender pairings. It's up to you to decide if that's true. I can't make that choice for you, but I can share my choice. My choice is, well, that's a cute story, but it's not my story. And you know what? I celebrate your right to talk about your story, but don't you dare try to convince me that
Yes.
you're more right than me. We all have a story. We all have a belief system, and sometimes those things change. But ultimately, Sarah Saran, I think if you believe that you are deserving of all the best things in life, then that's true. And generously, I maybe have no right to say so, but I hope you believe that's true.
I think we're saying
I'm
forms
going
of
to
the
add
same
to
thing.
that.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
That, amazing, both of you. I just want to add to that as well. I feel like none of us know what someone else is thinking, right? So to have an assumption that a cis person might not be interested in me or you or whoever, we don't know what someone's thinking. Like, don't give it that much thought. We don't know unless we're actually interacting. And if someone isn't interested, then that's fine. There will be other people that are.
Yes. If you accept as true that you should not.
That all cis people, like all cis people in the world, won't be interested. You don't know all cis people in the world, so we don't know that to be true. At the very basic level of this conversation, you don't know everyone who's cis, so you don't know that everyone who's cis won't like you.
Right. And you can do billions of tests. You can try to actually test literally billions of people to figure out who likes you, or you can just throw out this idea because it's unprovable and pay attention to what's really happening where you are. This is what I was saying. Like, I think Nikki and I are really saying forms of the same thing. You're saying, like, we're all equal. To me, that's true. That's observable. But when people come with their stories of, how we're supposed to be, anything like that.
This is actually bringing up a bubble of another thought I want to voice. And Miliana, I'd like you to kind of check my theory or to tell me if any of this resonates with you, which is, so we've been saying that, yeah, you can date a cis person as much as you want. And I'm not retracting that at all. You can date whoever if they find you attractive and you find them attractive, then have fun. But one thing that's just occurring to me now is sometimes there's an effort at gentrification. There's an effort of self-validation in the fact that, and I experienced it as a Hispanic immigrant coming to the United States. I knew who I wanted to date. I wanted to date blonde and blue-eyed because that's America, damn it. I wanted to integrate, and that's
I was just going to say, get yourself integrated.
That's, a very typical immigrant experience, that you want to become part of the mainstream. And so if that's the reason why you want to date that cis person, so check yourself. If that's the reason why you want to date a cis person, then it could be fraught with problems, because do you really like this person for the person, or do you like the privilege that they're attached to? And realize that you're going to be in a relationship which is going to be uneven because one is sitting on privilege and one is not, and that's all kind of problematic. And are they going to share their privilege with you? Are they going to bring you to grandma's dinner, or are they going to have you wait outside in the car or something like that? So I don't know what happened to me, and this is my own personal story, is I ended up, even though I was looking for the 6-foot-tall American cowboy, I ended up falling in love with an Asian non-binary 5-foot-tall, just completely not what I thought was my ideal. And this person makes me happy in 1,000 ways I didn't think possible. So what I'm saying is this idea of trying to gentrify and trying to climb up the ladder of privilege might be an erroneous one. So I'm just throwing that out there. Maybe a counterpoint. I don't know. Miliana, what do you think of all the blabber that I just spilled out?
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. And then, I mean, of course, as women of color, people of color, we can really identify with that. I'm first-generation American. My family, my grandmothers are from the Caribbean. So my mom's mom is from Jamaica. My dad's mom is from Trinidad, and both of their fathers are from India. So here I am, like the child of these, immigrants coming to this country and trying to navigate myself to this world. And growing up, I was either not light enough or not dark enough. My features, you know, were just something else. Like kids would make fun of me. I had full lips, and you know, I had like, you know, like smaller eyes and just different things. And so I never felt like I belonged. And my ideal growing up was, like the stereotypical Caucasian, blonde hair, blue eyed, you know. And I remember my stepfather, he's from Jamaica. He was like okay with me being with anyone but somebody Caucasian. And I think for me, that was my chance to rebel. I was like, okay, well, that's fine. You know, I'm going to do exactly what you don't like. And I was such an anomaly for my family. I was the black sheep, you know, like I wasn't listening to Indian music. I wasn't listening to Caribbean music. I wasn't listening to urban music, what they thought I should be like. And everyone would always be like, why are you so different? Like, why do you listen to, and they would call it white people music, or I liked alternative music and rock music. And I just really identified with that growing up. And I still like that kind of music. And for me now, it's like, there's no color. There's no such thing as black music. There's no such thing as white music. Like, it's just music. Like, the person behind the mic, maybe a certain color or a certain ethnicity, but that music is for everyone. And so growing up, I was rebellious, and I said, I'm going to do exactly what I want. I don't care what they think. And yeah, for years, I pretty much exclusively dated Caucasian men. And I mean, to this day, like most of the men who do find me attractive are Caucasian. I think within the last maybe 2 years, within the last 2 years, I kind of figured out myself, because I think back then it was privilege. I did want to climb up the ladder. I wanted to be the first lady. I wanted to have, you know, the privilege of being with affluent Caucasian man that would make me feel and look powerful to everyone else. You know, I wanted what came with that, my whole ideal of that. Mm-hmm. And I didn't care about the repercussions that came from the backlash from my family seeing me with someone that they wouldn't approve of me being with. But within the last 2 years, I kind of figured out who I was. And I met someone that was from my culture, and it clicked for me. And I was like, wow, you know, I don't need to sit there and try to get someone who I think is going to accomplish all the things that I'm looking for. Like, I can find that within my own backyard. I can find that within any backyard. I don't need to be with the stereotypical, you know, blonde hair, blue eyed Caucasian man. I can be with somebody from my own culture. And that's when, you know, things really clicked for me, and I started to take a different approach with dating. And my fiance, you know, is from my culture. Well, my ex-fiance, but, you know, he was from my culture. And I started to appreciate myself and my culture. You know, I think for the longest I was running from that. I'd been teased so much and ridiculed, and I always made to be the outcast. And, you know, growing up, I had a bunch of like Caucasian white friends, but they always accepted me and they always loved me. But I had no problem being a token brown kid, you know. That was not an issue for me. But I think
I can relate to all of this.
Say it again.
Sorry, Miliana. I was just saying I can relate to almost all of this. Like, this is such an amazing conversation. I think that a lot of people will hear this and be like, oh my God, me too, with my ethnicity or my gender or all of these things. You know, I grew up, like I said before, small town in Ohio, where the standard of beauty was not me. And I was a late bloomer as well. I didn't have my first kiss till I was in college. Like, though I was popular and had a lot of friends and was on homecoming court. And every time I go back home, there's someone who says to me, oh my God, I had the biggest crush on you back in school, but my parents were racist, so I couldn't ask you out.
So I had to be a little bit racist too.
But you know what? I mean, like the honesty, and that answered so many questions for me that I had when I was a kid of like, have a boyfriend or girlfriend but me. It's not
This
me.
speaks to-
It's
this
not
speaks to
about
this-
me.
This speaks to Sarah Saran's question, right? Like there was a belief for
Yeah.
you,
Yes.
a question that you had to confront, and now you get told much later in life from those
Yes.
people. You're not concluding for yourself.
Right.
Well, they're coming to you and telling you, right?
Yeah.
Now
and so,
you
I
have
mean,
more data.
For me, yeah, and I mean, going back to what Miliana was saying about, I've had, and just really quick, because I feel like this is a little off topic, but you know, growing up, I was always the different Black girl. Even now, some of my white friends I grew up with, I'm their only Black friend they've ever had. I was the one that was sort of relatable. I wasn't quote unquote ghetto. I was the one who, you know, they could kind of, it's in turn, you know, with some Black people, they didn't embrace me either. Because then it's like, well, you grew up in the suburbs and you're the daughter of a professor and you talk different and you lived in Europe. I mean, it's just like, oh my God, can I just be me? Like,
Right.
So we all have something, right? Everyone has something that they're for or bullied for or felt not good enough about. So it's all about find that self-confidence and embracing the things that made you different or weird and be like, oh my God, I'm unique. This is awesome. The way that all like women are getting butt implants and all these things, I grew up, I had that naturally. Okay. Like, so the thing that I was like, oh my God, now it's like, yeah, it's awesome. So 17-year-old, going back to our 17-year-old friend, the things that seem kind of challenging now those are very real feelings. I'm not trying to minimize that. Just know that once you're out of that environment, because it's a big world and you can go where you want. Okay. That there's going to be people who love that thing or love who you are. Okay?
I can
just remember that, please.
Bring this into the trans thing. You said you feel like this is off topic, and I'm listening to you say this, and I'm like, I feel really awkward doing this because I read this over and over when I read like Black women writing about things. I'm like, when I read this and I blank Black and put trans, it's almost identically my experience.
Yep. Yeah.
And for you to say all this stuff about being like the weird Black girl, I've been the weird, like the odd trans girl. Like I'm like very accessible to like cis people mainstream kind of audience. And I feel not at all part of the trans community. And I'm in Seattle. I feel like I'm part of a trans demographic, and I get roped into being, you know, asked about what I think about this or that about the community. And I'm like, I don't know it. I mostly feel kind of like not part of it. And to the extent that I was, it was being pulled in with my ex in this sort of like performative activism, and not being able to find my own way of doing like advocacy and activism that I can do, which now that I've permitted myself to do that for a while and been free of her to do what I do and understand myself increasingly, is finding stuff like this, being naturally included in things like this, which lets me reach an audience and do some kind of positive change in my own way without having to adopt someone else's rules for fighting, you know?
Yeah. Oh, so I have something that I'd like to share, and then I want to go into a point that Erin brought up, if you guys don't mind. So one thing that was tremendously empowering for me that I really want the audience to hear, this was a revelational point for me, because I was out as a bisexual since in my early 20s. And I was in a long-term relationship, I was in a marriage for many, many years as an out bisexual. And I thought that I had achieved the level of integration that can be hoped for, and I was way, way wrong. At one point, one of the panelists, and I forget if this was Callie Wright, who said this to me, which is there's a big difference between tolerance, acceptance, integration, affirmation, and celebration. It's a completely different thing to be tolerated. And my roommate said, I tolerate cats. So that's, I think, a really, really important point, a huge turning point for my life, in the fact that I wasn't aware to what extent I was thinking of myself as a broken heterosexual. And I was very, very thankful to my wife for the fact that she accepted me, even though she was a functional heterosexual and I was a damaged or failed or flawed heterosexual. and or normal, felt normal. And at one point, this was after my divorce, this was after my liberation, when I kind of came into my own, and it suddenly hit me, but I'm not. I'm not. I'm not. I mean, it's obviously the ugly duckling story, but I'm not a failed heterosexual. I'm just not a heterosexual. I'm a pansexual. So I came up with a really stupid analogy, and I like to use this a lot, which is a pineapple is not a bad banana. A pineapple is a different thing.
I have a much more literal version of that I said that I came to understand about myself a while ago, and I'm really grateful that I came to understand this before I met Jared, because he's the first cis guy that I've been with, which was that is a form of the same thing I've been talking about. While I had a belief about what my sexuality was, anytime I observed that it was actually not that, that was like crippling. I had to like reintegrate what it actually was with what I thought it was, and then I'd come up with a new track and I'd say, no, it's this, and then I'd look at it again, actually it's this. Shit. I'm like constantly readjusting to it. And at some point I was like, I'm just done. I'm so tired of it all. I'm not heterosexual. I'm not pansexual. I'm not bisexual, all this stuff, throw it away. I'm just sexual. I experience sexual feeling. I either feel attracted to you in a sexual way or I don't. And I got to tell you, chances are I don't. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. It's got nothing to do with like whether you look a certain way or whatever. It means like when I'm right there next to you, do I get that sensation or not? And that's it. So the rest of it, like once I threw all that away, had I not done that before I met Jared, I might have been really confused about all the sensation around meeting him, what it's like, So that's like you say, a pineapple is not a bad banana.
Yeah, and this brings me to now I want to float up something that Erin wrote as a note for the panel, which is, should we talk about how we met our current partners, right, Erin?
Yeah, because I think that it's really, and this is where I don't know. I know a lot of the apps, and there's a siren going by. Please excuse it for a second.
Are they looking for you?
I struggle in the sense that I know a lot of apps, I know a lot of online dating sites, I know a lot of meetup groups, but there are, to my knowledge, there are no really good sites that really have, quote unquote, a good selection of transgender people. So I'm at a loss. I've been asked this question before, and I'm like, it seems like most trans people I know have met their partners in kind of random ways. So so I think it'd be really helpful if some of you would like to share how you met current partners or past partners.
I'm happy to share. I just feel like I jump in and go first a lot. So I want to be like, Miliana, do you have thoughts on this?
Let's go in alphabetical order.
Or something, yeah. I mean, thank you.
Take it, Miliana.
Nikki. Oh, no, Miliana, yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about meeting partners.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, where do you meet
them?
Yes,
how did you meet current or past partners?
Okay. I'm currently single. But my ex-fiance, I met him actually on a dating website. It was a trans-geared or specific dating website. And it just kind of happened out of the blue. I just got out of a relationship when I met him. And so I really wasn't looking for anything. We just started talking, and then he wanted to meet, and I was okay with the idea, and we met. And for the longest, I just kind of was in denial. Like, he knew he wanted to be serious, but for me, I felt like I was really jaded. I just got out of a relationship that wasn't very great. I gave my all to this person, and it kind of backfired on me. And so I have this guy that's just like head over heels for me, and I don't know why. And it just was really interesting. But the more time I spent with him, I started to realize how amazing he was as a person. And he wasn't what I was looking for, but he was what I needed. And I think by the time we end up getting engaged, it kind of made sense for me. As to why we're not engaged anymore, I broke up the engagement. Like I said, he's from my culture, so it's a little harder. Black and Indian. He's full East Indian. So culturally, they prefer to kind of stick with their own. It's very taboo for me and my family, and even my grandmother. I remember she was talking to him and telling him what it was like for her dating my grandfather and how they wanted him with a full Indian girl. They didn't want him with a black girl. So, you know, here I am as this next kid, and I'm trying to be with this guy. His family was okay with me when they didn't know I was trans, but the moment that they knew, it changed everything. So it was just very difficult, and it scared me because culturally, when you do get married in an East Indian household, either, you know, we live together and then his family moves in with us, or we move in with the family. So I would be one-on-one with his mom. I would be taking care of his family. And so if his mother didn't like me and I wasn't accepted by the family, that wouldn't go very well. And I didn't want it to be a rift between myself and his family, or for him and his family. I didn't want him to have to choose me over them. And I didn't want a marriage where my in-laws didn't like me. I wanted to be fully accepted and embraced. My 2 relationships prior, I had amazing relationships with, you know, my boyfriend's family. So it was just kind of hard to be engaged and know that I was working towards marrying this man and his family didn't accept me.
Yeah, you need to kind of marry the whole family. By the way, Miliana, I think your phone might be dying because you lost video. I still hear you, but you lost video.
Yeah, I'm on 20% now, so I
Gotcha.
have an iPhone, so it's hard
me too.
to put
Nikki,
it
you want to
this
go
way and
next?
charge it at the same time. That's why I had it
Yeah.
away, but I'll see if I can get it charged.
I'll try to be fast so everyone can recharge. I have, I don't know, I've met people over the years in many different places, but the advent of the internet definitely made things easier. I also come from a small town in the Midwest. I'm from Wisconsin originally, and I frequently make the joke where, like, okay, so in LA, you might complain about having to, like, drive to another zip code because that takes 20 minutes. But in Wisconsin, like, the queer people are so spread out, and, like, between pockets of conservatism and every once in a while liberalism, like, you'll drive to the other side of the state to get a BJ. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, ooh, so
I thought you were going to say to go to get some Sonic, but
my range of tolerance for, you know, this kind of dating fuckery started off pretty broad. And thank goodness, because in my experience, it's like, the more picky you are and the more uppity you are, like, that's just, it's a numbers game. And I know that sounds really cynical, but it's true. To start, it's a numbers game, right? And then after you work through the numbers, then you work on chemistry and all that shit. But, like, without seeing it for what it is fundamentally, you just cut off the serpent's head, right? And, like, you don't even stand a chance. Again, because I'm really very out and, like, always have been, and my transition, I identify as non-binary, trans, feminine, genderqueer. And for the first 30 years of my life, despite knowing that I was, like, non-binary, trans, feminine, genderqueer, I think I didn't have the words for it. So I was just a super girly gay boy. So, like, I'd say, oh, I'm a gay boy who grew into a trans woman. Non-binary wins. But so even my, you know, dating hookup styles kind of evolved over time. And, you know, I would leverage certain demographics, again, depending on what I thought I wanted. If I just wanted to hook up and it was okay if they just had some yellow fever, and I'm like, whatever, I'll play the racial game. Like, I'll join, you know, the rich white guy, you know, young hot Asian site and get dinner and get a date, right? And then sometimes actually, you know, we became good friends, or, you know, dated for a while, and other times it was just a fun hookup. But it's like, I guess because and like, and Aaron, you said earlier you're alpha, I'm also very alpha. So it's just one of those things, like, I even if I make a poor choice, like, I'm accountable for that choice and I own it. So I've also made some crap decisions, but being alpha, I'm kind of like, well, I did that because I needed to learn something. You know what I'm saying? Like from Craigslist hookups to, you know, like drawn out, you know, coffees, just chatter. It's really evolved over time. But my current partner, and I should say there's kind of a caveat. I genuinely did not believe in love with a capital L. I thought that that was one of those brainwashy kinds of things that, you know, the patriarchy and capitalism or whatever was like trying to tell me to, you know, make me feel like, oh, I needed to like fall in love. But I have, you know, in my 30s, finally, the puke barf love I never believed in, like I now believe is true. It's like, I feel like such a hypocrite, right? And all of my friends who are in loving relationships are like, told you so. But for me, that's also a part of my personal journey, is just that I wasn't preoccupied in any kind of trying to find the one or a situation. I just kind of wanted to learn about what connection was for me and other people. And especially, you know, sexually and with, you know, my androgynous body that, you know, is by many conventional standards just masculine, but to me in my inner world, very feminine. And so cutting to the chase, 2017, let's be relevant to today, thank you. OkCupid, I have found to be the most kind of trans inclusive. You can pick, I think, up to 5 different genders. And so I did. And and my current partner found me on there, and he's cisgender, bisexual. And it was just kind of very natural, again, I think because of like what if you're not familiar with OkCupid, it's kind of like a never-ending Cosmo quiz. Like you just keep, it's like a game. And I think part of their success, right, is not only offering free accounts, which has a lot of services for a free service. It's also got that kind of gamer mentality where they engage you to participate, like keep on. And, you know, as we discussed earlier in the conversation, the whole being honest and getting to know yourself. So you not only answer a question according to what your ideas or values are, but how important that is to you. So it's a multi-dimensional kind of matrix. And I don't know what kind of algorithm they use to make it all work, but in my experience, anything over 80%, like we can at least be friends. You know what I mean?
You're
like,
at least going to have a good conversation.
Probably be cool.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Serenine, do you want?
For me, it's perfect.
So, Serenine, I saw the note that you wrote on the chat, and
her follow-on question,
that she can speak to this more at serenine.com. We are looking at.
I meant her one-on-one question. I was gonna answer the question here about the dating thing.
Great. Yeah, but go ahead. We're about 13 minutes from our ending point.
I think I can keep it under 13. I mean, I can go longer if you need me to, because that's my natural state. But I've practiced it shortened. So here's the thing. I'll try to give you bullet points of these 2 relationships that I've been in, engaged in since understanding myself or remembering that I was a girl and engaging the world that way again. First one is on Tinder. Part of the construction of that is by the time she finds me on Tinder, I have on my profile this picture of me holding a sign that says BTW, I'm trans. And it's just right there. The first word of my profile is transgender, because I'm so tired by this point of people swiping right and messaging me like, hey, cutie. And I'm like, hello. And they're like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I'm not into that. And I'm like, not into what? Is it because I'm a veteran? Like I was young and I needed the money. But they don't answer. So I got tired of that. I take this picture, I put it up. She sees this and is like, and she's coming from this perspective of, I want to date a trans woman because this is like political for her, that trans people are so set upon. And at the time, this is first relationship territory for me. I'm like, how wonderful. Come prey on me. I don't understand what's about to happen, right? But the way this plays out ultimately, she's constantly like, you could be this, you should be that. You know, why do you do this? Nobody does that. And I'm like, you know, later I look back on this, I'm like, why the fuck are you with me? You know, like, you're so constantly dissatisfied, except for the first date when you seemed really into me. And that was enough for me. Right, but then we end up, she breaks up with me. She dumps me, and then a few months later, she goes to Trans Pride and picks up a new trans woman. And that's when I really get grossed out by the whole thing. So this is part of informing my understanding of this practice of shopping for a type of thing. of going on a dating app
Yeah,
and saying it's swiping
objectifying.
left, swiping right. Yeah, I call Tinder Judger, and I drop the E, so it's the same thing. It's JUDGR, and I'm just judging because it's my practice, right? So I threw all of that away, and like I appreciate. There's one thing I want to talk about. OkCupid, as a minor tangent, is that I do love the depth of like the data and the comparison and the matching percentages. But there's also this like fixedness to that, and that I answer this question now, I'm not going back to it. 2 years later, I have maybe a completely different answer. And someone's matching with me on that. And they're like, oh, I really appreciate that you said this. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's an embarrassing part of my past that I'd like to distance myself from. And I don't have a way to incorporate that with OkCupid because it doesn't keep up with me. So after separating from this previous relationship and then coming gradually to understand how abusive it was and how much I suffered, and the mechanism of that to me, a lot of it was this dating practice, this idea of sorting people and rating them. And instead of being where I was with that person, like comparing and wondering who's better, any of that kind of thing. So when I meet Jared, I've left my profiles up because I think it's important people understand that trans women exist and we date and we're like in that world. But I've deleted all the apps. I haven't checked them in I don't know how long. And by the time I meet him, I'm just completely focused on doing my public figure page. I'm doing whatever my own work and being where I am. And understanding that these 4 steps that I'm running constantly are going to be the thing that helps me do my best in any relationship, whether it's reconnecting with my kids whenever I'm able to do that, or being with someone in this intimate way, or just meeting someone in like the checker at the grocery store, is to just be where I am and know what's really true and discard things that are not, like these ideas of relative position and social hierarchy, so that I can really truly do what's kindest. So he messages me on my page, this long, you can actually see all this stuff on my page, the initial message and everything. Just reaching out and saying like he's not sure like whether I'm open to meeting someone or if I'm dating or any of this kind of stuff, but he'd really love to just take me to dinner and he thinks I'm fascinating in these ways. But it was very, very personalized to me. Like he had interacted with me in certain ways that I felt very seen by his saying, these are the reasons I would like to just take you to dinner. And so from there, I'm like, what are you doing tonight? And we go and meet, and then I'm being me and super extra and like more out than out on my page. I live stream him meeting me, and I live stream several times throughout the night how I'm feeling. I live stream him coming back here with me saying, conventional wisdom says this is a terrible idea and he's definitely going to kill me, or there's some kind of like rape war going to happen because we both have penises and all this like, right? But I'm like, but here's what's actually happening. I don't know. And here's how it goes. It's like I'm playing guitar and we chatter for a while and that was it. So it's very much more this like, even now, like we've been together for a little over 6 months. Previous relationship lasted 10 months, but I see this sort of midway point where it kind of was crumbling more and more and more. This is increasingly building, but it's because from the beginning, like from the first date, I was like, I'm never going to be your girlfriend. So like, you can throw that out right now. This idea that this is going to go that way, it's not. And that's it. And it's not to say, and I tried to make this clear to him, and I feel he has understood because he's still around, that it doesn't mean I'm not going to get close to you. It means I'm not going to buy into this idea that we have this context. Mm-hmm. And that permits me to just check out and not constantly be aware of things like this discomfort we had last night over something like where he said he would be available within like not a certain amount of time, but like soon or in a little bit, not very long, something vague like that. This is the kind of thing we've been talking about all through this session. This means one thing to him. It means something totally different to me. We have a conflict because we don't think we think we're talking about the same thing and we're not. So I was able to communicate with him through these like I statements and just what's objectively true, and not getting into some sort of argument about the context or you're my boyfriend, you're supposed to blah, blah, blah. I just say, when I get this kind of communication, it enters my autism, my sphere of perception and understanding. And to me, it just means whatever it means. And I respond to that. And that's my work and my problem. But I would like to get messages that are estimated time specific. And I can do this interaction because I've thrown out the context and I'm paying attention to the person and not a practice of, oh, this isn't working, it's uncomfortable, I'm going to get somebody else. And
now we're going into this broader subject, which potentially would be good to have another panel around, which is what makes a successful relationship, how do you handle conflict resolution, and how do you do communication? And we could do 2 hours on that.
I have high availability. Call me.
Yeah, I actually
Nikki, how did Nikki meet partners? Did we do Nikki yet?
I thought we
just to summarize many different ways. But my current partner, who's my most serious and beloved, I suppose, I don't say suppose, I feel vulnerable saying that live to strangers. So
He might be
No, I
listening.
stand by that. I'm deeply in love and committed to him, and I met him on OkCupid. But a lot of that was
Okay.
the conversations we had in chat, and then our first date and what we talked about and our energies, and 2.5 years later, how we've grown and challenged one another. It's an ever it's a process. I mean, Saranine, you've talked several times about staying in the moment, and I very much agree with that from multiple perspectives. As an actor, I studied improv, as we all do, and also I'm into Zen and existentialist philosophy. So for me, what reality with a capital R is precisely what I'm choosing it to be right now. I mean, and right now, just every consecutive
it's a constant
moment.
experience of all of your sense.
And I'm going to try to also throw in. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're almost at time. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to try to throw in a couple of cents from my own experience, and then I think that we'll have Erin wrap up.
Just so you know, my phone is going to die, so.
Okay, so if it disappeared, it wasn't anything we said.
Yes, exactly. But I'll type it in the YouTube chat.
Okay, wonderful. So I just wanted to say that I found my sea legs on Craigslist, and it's not something I would do now, but it was a really healthy and really useful stage of my life. In 2010, I went through a lot of Craigslist. Well, not a lot, but I used Craigslist pretty actively. My sister, at one point, we were having a conversation, and she got wind of this, and she said, "Are you crazy?" And we developed safety protocols. She said, "Call me before you go on a date. Let me know what address you're going to. Call me when you're out." And but I've never had a bad experience, and I met some nice people. And I'm talking about hookups. None of this was meaningful long term. But I found my sea legs. I found my comfort zone. I found out about myself, what I like, what I don't like. So it was a very worthwhile part of my life. OkCupid, I've been on since 2010. I've met friends that I still have in my life. I've had a long-term girlfriend who is now long-distance girlfriend since 2012, and I met her on OkCupid. And so OkCupid has been really good. However, you have the option of becoming invisible to non-queer people. You can become invisible to straight people. And I had to, sadly, take that option because of the fact that I was getting hate mail randomly from cisgender heteronormative people that would, and it's partly because OkCupid has become a little bit more Tinder-like. So now they would find me, they would think they're cute, then they would find out that I'm trans, and then they would feel inclined to write me hate mail. And my response to this had been like, well, I never had any intention of drawing you in. Why don't you just go away? But their implication was that I had actively seduced them by virtue of being open or visible to straight people. And it's sad because I actually would very much like to be available for cis straight people, but I'm only available to queer people on OkCupid. Separately from that, what has been tremendously effective for me, and I strongly recommend this, is to be part of community and to be very visible in communities of people that support you and people that you like. I'm a member of Sex Positive World, which has chapters in Los Angeles and in Portland and in Chicago and in New England and overseas, in Amsterdam and in London and other places. And we are a very active community that's very queer friendly. And I met the love of my life within the local chapter of Sex Positive World, and we were just going to events together. We started interacting, and we discovered each other that way, and it very quickly evolved into a very, very meaningful relationship. And now, even though I still class myself as poly, I find it difficult to engage with other people because I am so spoiled by this relationship that's so rich and so beautiful.
Oh, that's so sweet.
So that's what worked for me. And by the way, this works really well for extroverts and for ambiverts. It doesn't work as well for introverts. But the way that my secret of success is become active in a group and shine in that group. Whatever it is, if you play guitar, do that. If you tell stories, tell stories. If you want to help with logistics, help with logistics, but become visible and liked through just doing what you do, and then somebody's going to notice you, and that's going to lead somewhere.
That's what I mean about just being where you are and having that be your practice, right? And you will have this community. I think so much of what leaves trans people vulnerable in so many ways to the like a really deep level of devastation in a breakup is that lack of community, whether it's like family or like some kind of religious circle, some kind of cultural group, something.
Yeah, and I totally agree with what
yourself.
Miliana said, which is I would never date, I would never be in a committed relationship with someone whose family didn't accept me. Just it's important to have group, it's important to have family too.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And I want to pass the ball over to Erin. Okay, now explain to us what all this means.
Sum it all up, tie it together.
Oh my God, come on.
And give it a trans perspective as well, if you could, please.
Right, here we go. So before my phone dies, I just want to say again, thanks for having me. This was an amazing conversation. I'm going to be following all of you on your various social medias because you all are amazing. And I just, like, Cassie, good job with this panel. It was really great.
Thank you.
In conclusion, perspective, identity, know thyself so that you can share in this current moment what that identity is with others.
In this current moment,
terms of relationships, friendships, just all the ships. Try to have fun, because it really, dating, quote unquote, should be fun. You're just getting to know. It really just should be two people getting to know each other. Okay. On dates, whatever, a group of people getting to know each other, whatever your thing is, people getting to know people. Okay. Be safe, self-care. You are in a space where you want to date, or just you don't want to be in a space where you want to meet people. Just know yourself. If you're in that space, that's totally okay too. It's better to take yourself out of a dating game if you aren't feeling it than to just do it and force yourself. Okay. But also, like everyone just said, like Cassie just said, being social is really great. Having a community, meeting people that really support you and empower you and just are there and who kind of get what's going on. It's so important right now, especially. So smooches and love and yay. And on my website, my website is thedatingadvicegirl.com. I'm on all the social medias as well. Erin Tillman, aka the Dating Advice Girl. I'll stay here as long as I can until my phone dies, but if I disappear, it's because my phone's dead.
I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity to meet and chat with everyone here, and I really too I love the interaction. I love the other insights, and I'm really excited. This points like I talked about at the beginning, like would I agree or disagree? Like I love how much of it is like versions of the same thing, that we're talking about the same very true things. And that is what I came in with at the beginning, is like, I don't need to let myself get upset about these things, because true things are true either way. I don't even have to keep talking about them because they're still true.
Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing, everybody. And Miliana, Sarah, Nikki, and Erin, it was wonderful to have you all on this panel. I think that we did pretty good. And we're going to now say goodbye. And hopefully we'll have more of these. And meanwhile, we're going to continue exploring at the Empowered Trans Woman Summit.
Bye. Be safe.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.